This live presentation was produced in Ashland, Oregon by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. RVML relies on the support of our volunteers, members, and donors to organize and present these programs. For more information about this presentation, or to borrow, download, or purchase other recordings from our catalog, please visit our website at rvml.org.
Simply listen. That all may be revealed. You think you're squinting. Well, thank you. My name is Jeff Volk. I'm the producer of the video that you just saw there, and the International Sound Colloquium, which was the logo that was up on the overhead when we first came in. I want to thank you for coming here this evening to experience what promises to be a very interesting little exploration of sound and vibration in its subtler senses. I didn't realize when I composed that poem that it is a perfect way to introduce material that could be perceived in an extremely analytical way, which is exactly what I would like to avoid here. It's very easy to get into the mind and start structuring and analyzing. There will be a fair amount of structure and analysis here, which I'll breeze through as quickly as possible. But my purpose in presenting this material is not to give you another schematic to superimpose on life. It's actually to plant a few seeds of ways of perceiving and hope that they can take infertile soil of your consciousness and allow something totally new to transpire for all of us. Every time I do one of these presentations, which is pretty regularly these days, it's a totally new experience for me. Not only in what comes out of my mouth, but what comes back from people, and I learn an incredible amount from doing these. So this is not a canned presentation, it's very fluid. In fact, there are a lot of people here who know me, which is unique, and you know that it's not going to be a canned presentation. It's just not my nature. So I would invite everyone to just relax and move into the space of open awareness. This evening is going to be whatever it is. My intention is to merge a few streams of consciousness into a holistic view that will now allow us to view things anew. I have one attribute that I'm aware of that is worth keeping, and it's the ability to find good teachers. I've found a lot of them in my short span of years, and they've been invaluable in opening me up to different ways of being, different ways of seeing, and different ways of proceeding on this wonderful path of unfoldment that we're all on. I will introduce a few of them as I go along. Many of these references are available in the back in the book room. I have to mention that a couple of boxes didn't show up from FedEx, so the video that I'll show several clips from of Sound, Mind, and Body will not be here for sale, although it can be purchased using the pre-order form, and there'll be well, actually, I want to thank Jordan for bringing me here, first of all. A wonderful, wonderful service that Jordan's providing here. And I've never seen anything like this as a free library, so hail Jordan. And I also want to thank the others in the room who told people about this event so that the room could be as full as it is. There actually are a few seats available if people want to sit down who are standing in the back. The reason I got off on Jordan is because the FedEx boxes will arrive at Jordan's house tomorrow, and those videos will be there. So if people want the videos or some of the other things that are sold out, Naomi can tell you how to do the pre-orders in the back, and they'll be available for pickup here starting tomorrow or whenever the center is next open, the library is next open. So, I wanted to just make a couple of brief mentions that I always forget when I do presentations. One is that on a clipboard in the back by the books, there is a little sign-up sheet for people who'd like to be, if you make it through tonight, and you care to have any further content, this will inform you of future events and releases of forthcoming videos like the one on psychoacoustics that I'm working on now. Actually will come out as a DVD. A similar presentation, only different, will be held on Thursday in Nevada City, California, around Grass Valley area, through the New Frontiers of the Gold Country. It will be at the Luminarium, the Imaginarium in Grass Valley. And then I'll be doing a program up in Portland at the New Renaissance Bookshop on Sunday afternoon. It'll be a 2-hour slot as well. So that's some of the history that I needed to say. And let's see, any other announcements? Oh yeah. Good. Yeah, if this is something that you enjoy, I have audio tapes of an interview I did on the Laura Lee show. Anyone familiar with Laura Lee's syndicated show? A few people. This is about the esoterics of cymatics. Covers much of what I'll go in, well, who knows what I'll go into here. Covers much of what I'd like to cover tonight in a brief encapsulated form. So it would be useful if you wanted to share this with someone else. There are audio tapes in the back. Also wanted to just mention a few things. My website, for one, which is something I never remember, is cymatic with no S, source, so there's one S in the middle, cymaticsource.com. And I do have some business cards that have that on there, but they'll inevitably all disappear, so. On that website, there's an article printed in Kindred Spirits magazine. People familiar with Kindred Spirits in the UK? It's their preeminent alternative consciousness magazine. And I'll have this here for people to look at because it's much prettier in print than it is on the website. They did an absolutely beautiful job of laying this out with a couple of full-page color spreads that are just gorgeous of cymatics images. So before I go any further, cymatics, is this a new word to anyone in the audience? Okay. Cymatics is the study of sound or vibration. Well, to be specific, cymatics is a study of wave phenomena and vibration. It's a term that was coined by Swiss medical doctor Hans Jenny, who died in 1972, so he's no longer with us. This is Hans Jenny. This is Hans Jenny right side up. And how's the focus? Can people see that okay? We're going to have the blue tint from the video projector staying on. That's just the way we need to do it here. So, Hans Jenny was a medical doctor, he was a painter, he was a musician, he was a doctor of sciences, a philosopher of sciences, very much a Renaissance man. Lived in Dornach, Switzerland, which is the repository and the living teaching center of Rudolf Steiner's work. People familiar with Steiner? Okay, great. Well, Jenny was a Goethean scientist, a Goethean philosopher. He studied and perceived through the mode outlined by Goethe's phenomenological approach, which means quite simply that he observed. He observed the particulars with a consciousness for the whole. So he was able to see types, patterns, and forms, but understand the causes behind them, the similarities, the types, the fields that they created. Now, I'm going to go back to this overhead, but I want to show you some of his artwork. Jenny was very attuned to the animal kingdom. In fact, I have a copy of his art book that was published posthumously of his work called Tierlandschaften, which means animal landscapes. And as you can see, well, as you probably can see here, let's try and make it a little bit better. Yeah, the blue is causing a major shift in this thing, but it will actually work well for the next one. Chagall said of Jenny's work, I love him, he's a mystic like me. He really captures the soul of the animal. And as you'll see, when you begin to understand what cymatics experiments reveal, you'll see how similar his paintings were to cymatics experiments. You can perhaps see, maybe just for this 1 second, I'll ask someone to do something for me. Could you stand up and just hold this in front of that blue beam right over your head? Thank you. Right there. Just block that out. There. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah, you can actually see something now.
Color.
Yeah, okay, cover that whole thing up good. There we go. There. So birds. And this is where the birds live. And it's their environment. And it's almost as if the birds are swirling this vortex of energy, emerging right out of their environment. This next image illustrates it even more radically and dramatically. This is entitled Uhu. Do you see how he's just emerging right out of the flow of the environment? Now, do you think this guy had a concept that everything is energy? All is vibration? Thank you very much. Thanks. Okay. So, what I'm going to do now is totally shift gears and do something differently than I normally do. I want to basically introduce the concept of cymatics first, and then I'll show it to you in motion. But what I'm showing you here is the structural element that gets played out when vibration is imposed on inert substance. And if this feels like, your 9th grade physics class, it won't last long, so just grin and bear it. So here we have a steel plate with, let's see if I can focus this a little bit better, with particles of sand strewn on it, calcined sand, very regular spherical shaped sand. It's been heated up to make it very irregular. Now, there's vibration imposed on the sand through, well, I'll just show you this. These are old-fashioned amplifiers and frequency generators. The sound comes out through there, goes through the little alligator clips, up into the steel plate. The speaker just lets you hear what the frequency is. He just used sine waves, pure tones. And he got the speaker humming. And the way he did this is he attached crystals to the steel plate. Anyone here still remember what a phonograph was? Okay, we got a few old-timers. Great. This is a phonograph in reverse. A phonograph has a piezoelectric mechanism called a needle. It reads the pressure waves in what used to be a record. The force of the needle going side to side distorts the crystal. It actually distorts the crystal slightly, creating an electrical current, goes up through the tone arm, into the amplifier, gets modulated, and comes out as music. Well, this is exactly the same process in reverse. Electrical current, a sine wave, an audible sine wave within the audible tone, audible range, comes through the wires, generated by all that equipment back there, through the wires, up through into these little grown crystals. They're very precise crystals, very regular. And they're created specifically because they're very receptive to this. And they start actually flapping up and down like a giant tone arm needle, creating a distortion in this thick steel plate, and actually set the plate to singing. You can hear the plate singing. So what happens is, over time, what happens here? What are you seeing there? Anyone want to take a stab at it? Come on, louder.
It's making patterns.
Yes, and why is it making patterns?
Frequency, vibration.
Exactly. What's responding to the vibration?
Sand.
Sand through the medium of the steel plate. Right. Exactly. So, what you're actually seeing here isn't a whole lot different than what you're seeing when a string vibrates. Do you get the similarity? No. Okay, I'll tell you. Here's a beautiful illustration from the book, Harmonograph, a visual guide to the mathematics of music by Anthony Ashton, newly published, part of a series. And I told you this is a fluid presentation. Excuse me? No, it's backwards. Thanks. There we go. Yeah, it's going to be hard to read. Well, we'll do the best we can with it. Since I published this book of Hans Jenny's, after he died, the books went out of print. This is 2 volumes. Volumes 1 and 2 are included in this massive tome. The books went out of print, and the videos got more and more popular. I'll show some clips out of the cymatics videos. And they stirred more interest in the books, which I imported all the remaining copies from Switzerland. And they were selling out quick. So it became necessary for something to happen, which was me to republish these books, which required translating one from the German. And, I wrote a publisher's confession at the beginning of this book for a very specific purpose. And the publisher's confession simply stated that I sold 2,000 copies of Volume 2 of this work without ever having read the book. And the reason I wrote that is, and the reason that John Beaulieu wrote an introduction for right-brainers, was so that people wouldn't be intimidated by the science in this book. It is totally, totally possible to read the captions. There's thousands of photographs in here. Most of them are captioned. And look at the pictures, and maybe dive into a chapter as the spirit moves you, and get a really good comprehension of cymatics. Or so I thought until I read every word of it, and got a really good comprehension of cymatics. What do you hear now? Okay, I guess we didn't need that. Okay. So, having published that book, I'm responsible for licensing the images for people who want to reuse cymatics images. And there are a lot of them. Probably half the books on that table have images, cymatics images in them. For the reason that they really convey something that is incredibly obvious yet usually unperceived. And we'll get into that in a little while. I get an email or a phone call from John Martineau, who's the publisher of this book series. They're called Wooden Books, and there are now 8 of them out. These books are the antithesis of the cymatics book. John's book, A Little Book of Coincidence, it's got 1 page of text, 1 page of graphics per topic. It's the kind of thing that is so understated that it just leaves you craving more research. These books cost $10. I mean, these are just amazing little things. So John asked me for permission to reprint something in a book that was coming out 2 years later, which has just come out now, the Harmonic book. I just told you that. And he said, I'll send you the books, take a look at it, and tell me what you think. Well, whenever anyone sends me something with an idea towards using cymatics, I open it up and I read everything from the cover on out. You know, who they dedicate the book to, who they thank, when it was published, who published it, you know, how they put it in the Library of Congress. I just read everything, because I really want to see how specific they are and how they're going to use this material. Because I have immense respect for the specificity of Hans Jenny's research. And I don't want to see it 100 monkeyed into, as it gets done all the time. And people who use it because it conveys things very lucidly. So then it's so universal that it can be used for so many different things that it begins to lose its potency because people sort of water it down and just say, oh, well, it shows this. And in fact, it does show that, but that's not nearly what it shows. So I got to his dedication, John Martineau, the Wooden Book series. And I said, yes. Whatever you want to do with this, you can do with it. His dedication to people who have tragically grown up in a world devoid of a magical cosmology. To people who have tragically grown up in a world devoid of a magical cosmology. Now, don't just lay it on the Gen Xers. I mean, this has been happening since we first produced artificial light and began to cut off our attachment to the heavens. John Martineau's book, A Little Book of Coincidence, is a condensation of his book of coincidence. And this outlines graphically all the patterns that the planets make in the heavens, how they relate to one another. They all look like spirographs. They're amazing. What they illustrate is harmonic geometric order in the heavens. What cymatics illustrates is harmonic geometric patterns created by sound on inert matter. So there are certain universal patterns that get played out. And if we had the weekend, I would get into the whole sacred geometry of all this, which is totally fascinating. And not just to the left-brainers. I mean, there's a crop circle book out there that's there because Freddie Silva licensed some of the cymatics images. He sent it to me, and I said, yes, perfect. You know, it shows up in, there's a mandalas book out there, published by DK, which is a major publisher. I got a call while I was pruning a tree. I was up in a scaffold pruning a tree from this woman who wanted to use the cymatics images. We ended up working together for 6 months, and I ended up writing the chapter on waveforms for her. And they incorporated cymatics into a book on mandalas. Judith Cornell has used it in her mandalas book. So cymatics appears all over the place, not just in beautiful texts on the mathematics of harmony, like this book, The Power of Limits, Proportional Harmonies in Nature, Art, and Architecture. I mean, I could just do book reports the whole night here. I have a couple of copies out here. You're welcome to come up here and look at these as well. beautiful, beautiful text on the golden mean ratio and the Fibonacci series, also outlined by Drunvalo Melchizedek in a couple of books I have out there. Depending on your metaphysical, this was done by an architect. And he relates it to architectural forms, biological forms, art forms, nature, art, and architecture, and the harmonics of music as well. So you're beginning to see where some of this is going in the realm of harmonics, universal patterns, order. Things like, ooh, are we cooking this water? No way. So, what I was trying to show you before is these patterns that appear as static patterns. This is actually a dynamic process, but we're seeing snapshots of it. Over time, taking undifferentiated forms, bringing them into very differentiated forms, is the same process that happens with a string. And again, I'm just going to touch on this very quickly. Fortunately, I have a prop here, which is propagating waves. So you see how just striking it in the center propagates a wave in each direction, right? And as you're patient, you'll see it hit the top and bounce back down. So it creates an interference pattern, comes back down again. Okay? Now, if I were to strike that from one end and flash it, like you do like a jump rope or something like a clothesline, you get a different pattern. But what you get by striking a string is you get a progression of waves moving through the string. Now, what you're seeing here happens within a matter of microseconds. It's not like you get one harmonic, two harmonic, three harmonic, boom. You get it like instantaneously. You just get the harmonics right there. So the string oscillates once, the waveform moves down to the center, you get the octave oscillating the second time. This is the node. The node is the point of least vibration in the string. Everything's vibrating. That's the point of least vibration. The node is the note, the octave note. Then you get the node continuing to progress down the string towards infinity, generating higher and higher overtones. Do you see how these get smaller and smaller? The overtones go up in mathematical ratios. It goes from 1 to 1 to 2 to 1, exactly in the half, to 3 to 1. You see there's 3 little dot, 1, 2, 3 areas here. To 4 to 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is a quarter of the length, which makes 2 octaves. Keeps on going, 5 to 1, 6 to 1, up to infinity. So it gets higher and higher. It gets more and more difficult to discern. And on the other end of the string, you get these nodes here, which create your intervals, your intervallic tones. So that's your course in music therapy. How did I do, Alana? Alana's a graduate of, it wasn't Berkeley, it was New York. Juilliard, yes. Yes. And you can speak with her if you really want to know that stuff.
No.
Okay. So this is the fast course in everything. This is definitely the crash course. Now here you see something that's similar. But what's different about this is not done over time. It's done using frequency differences. Now given what you just saw in those illustrations, which is the higher frequency here?
Bottom right.
It's bottom right for me, it's bottom right for you. How about that? It's amazing. Yes, this one here. Why?
Complete.
Differentiation. So what you see is just about the same. And you never knew you liked science, did you? Frequency. Almost the same, yes, frequency, big one. That's what you see here. You start with the fundamental, moves up, moves up, moves up. The higher the frequency, the smaller the fields. The closer, the tighter the frequency, the higher the frequency. Frequency is just how many times it goes up and down as it goes across the string. Okay? So here you start off with figures of 1690, which is in the audible range, then moving to 2500, 4820, and 78. So it basically triples, going from here to here. Now, I'm going to stop for a second and show you a video clip that will enable you to actually understand what's happening here. And then, well, hopefully, given if I haven't taken it too far out. And then we'll get back into the structural aspect. Okay. This is a video of some experiments done with Hans Jenny's original equipment in a place in Winterthur, Switzerland called the, well, I don't remember what it's called actually, Technorama. So it's a science of, a museum of science and technology. Jenny's original equipment resides there, and I was graced with the ability to get Christian Studen, who was Jenny's original assistant. In the old films I have of Jenny's work, some of which have been transferred onto video and are available, you see this guy as a 20-year-old, working with Jenny all the time. And here he is a little bit later. Okay, we're going to need an audio adjust here. Probably will need to come down from where it was. Ready? Oh, I have that one. And this.
This is our telescope, with which you can make the human voice visible. You sing into it here, and the air passes through there, comes out here, and then you put different frames on it. Here, a six-sided figure. Then you take a natural rubber membrane, put into a frame, place it on here. Then, in this case, we use as indicator for the vibrations sand. And stir it lightly onto here. And now I'm going to sing into it. So everything is specific. If you have the same frequency and the same tension and the same indicator, you always get the same form. The higher the tone, the more complicated the form.
Yes, please. Thank you. So, you begin to see that cymatics can illustrate the unseen phenomenon. That was really the greatest contribution that Jenny made in this field, was being able to make visible the invisible. We perceive very differently through our eyes and through our ears. Our eyes tend to articulate, tend to divide, tend to see things as separate. And this is where we're going tonight, so this is a very important point. Our ears tend to integrate. They tend to be a part of the environment, or to make one feel a part of the environment. Your ears articulate as well. A trained musician can articulate amazingly well. We articulate directionally. We articulate the fight or flight mechanism through our ears. So it's not like the ears don't articulate, but they are the more feminine receptive organ, whereas the eye is the more masculine projected. And the way they develop embryologically is the eye actually extrudes as a prominence, is that properly said? Protrusion, whatever, protrudes as a prominence of the brain. It actually moves forward embryologically, whereas the ear starts out as undifferentiated epithelial tissue and spirals inward. And I'll show a little bit about this further on. The spiraling inward is a deeply spiritual progression, starting on the surface, the superficial aspects. The ear spirals inward and actually hollows out the densest bone in the body, called the petrous bone, lodged behind the temple here, in this sacred chamber. And that's where our cognitive resides. So it's a process of moving inward, spiraling inward. Very, very representative. So, what I'm getting to with these overheads here is I'm demonstrating the structural aspect of cymatics. So here you see on a round plate, you see a circular plate, more accurately put. You see the forms create almost mandala patterns. Now, between these two, which one's the higher frequency? Okay. How do you decide which is higher frequency? Finer lines. Finer lines. Tighter fields. Greater articulation. In something that I'll show you later, you'll be able to see the same process in water. With light, well, I won't tell you about it because you'll just see it. But the differentiation and the complexity increases with the frequency. Okay, what does that look like? High cone, yes. What do you think the circular... I gave this talk 3 weeks ago at the beginning of April, in middle of April, it's just a few weeks ago, in Tampa, Florida. Someone in the audience, when I told them what they were, their jaw dropped, and they just blurted out, turpentine. What she blurted out is, where does turpentine come from? High resin. And then I put this one on. I totally, by me, I've shown this thing 1,000 times. Totally. What does this look like? Paraffin. Which is synthetic wax. I mean, if he used beeswax, who knows what he would have gotten? Just amazing, you know, that there may be, and I can't say this is true, this is where the 100th monkey stuff comes in. This is like the ohm and the drop of water, you know that story. You know, regardless, that's actually secondary to why I'm showing you this. I'm showing you that vibration creates structure. Specific vibrational forms manifest in the visual forms. That was Yenny's greatest gift, making all this stuff visible.
How is that created?
Okay.
Hey Jeff,
Yes.
was that honey on top of the membrane?
Yeah, basically
Or
these.
paraffin, I mean?
Yeah, these are. I believe these were photographed from above
Right.
on a
That's what I thought, right?
some sort of vibrating membrane. It's in the book, and I guess I need to publish another edition because I don't remember where it is. But it's either taut latex. I would think it's probably metal. It could be on top of aluminum, on top of glass. It could be any one of a variety of substances. So what you're seeing is a photograph from above being lit. It's called the Schlierian method, where they stroboscope. And no, I don't have video of that, but I will show you something with the water before we take the break, and that will give you a better idea. So I really want to honor the time frame we have here, and I know that it's hot in the room, so I don't want to lay too heavy into this stuff. Now, what does this show that's different from what we saw before? We've got the honeycomb element in there, but what else do you see there that begins to add another element? Patterns? Petals, okay. Well, there are petals. It's a geometric form. It's a harmonic geometric form. By harmonic, I mean regularly shaped, reflecting geometric or actually logarithmic intervals that relate to the harmonic overtone series. Yes, that's true. We saw that in the honeycombs too. Look at this thing from a non-structural point of view. What's beginning to be illustrated here? Can you see something other than structure being illustrated? And I realize that it's a little difficult to see because of the blue light. Who said that? Yes, exactly. Movement. Can you begin to see this going on in here? And what kind of a movement?
It's like a rotation.
Well, there's movement on it. What kind of a movement is this? There's a very specific name for this, and anyone involved in esoterics would know what a vortex is. I mean, we have them in our bodies, we have them, they appear, they're ways of transmuting energy from one dimension to the other. John Below talks about this extensively in his books. So this is a vortex, and you can see it beginning to appear. Now these are two dissimilar substances. What are they? I believe it is the paraffin and turpentine interacting together. And you see, this was lycopodium dust sprinkled across the top here. So you can see the dust is actually reflecting the flow patterns in the turpentine, which is a less viscous material, so it is more responsive. Less viscous simply meaning it's more liquid than paraffin, which is a little bit denser. It's not quite as fluid. So the more fluid material will respond more to the vibrations. And you can see, again, the more textural patterns showing up there. Now, where do we see cymatics? Well, Yenny said very clearly in his latter chapters of his book that once they are attuned to the phenomena of cymatics, can observe it in any field of science. He studied meteorology, orology, which is the way waves propagate through the earth. He studied water waveforms. He was a medical doctor, so he studied cytology, the study of cell development. He studied physiology, the way the nerves propagate, the way the cerebral spinal fluid moves, the way the muscles striate. There's a beautiful book called Sensitive Chaos that outlines how the spiral pattern works through the bones. I mean, you find these flow patterns and these waveforms, these beautiful spiral patterns that always come out in a helix. It's more sacred geometrical ratios in everything. So he basically said, you look at the skies, you look into the cosmos. Another cymatics experiment. What does this look like? Sure. I mean, this could be a spiral galaxy with the energy flowing in and around. You can't quite see it too well in this, but there is an actual eye of that hurricane there. It could be a weather formation as well. So both of these forms are dynamic structures showing the spiral coming in from the exterior, moving in, curling in the vortex. Where might this show up in the body better than anywhere else? Doing experiments with sound? The cochlea of the ear. A perfect spiral, a golden mean ratio spiral. And I would certainly urge you to just flip through the first few pages of this book, because he outlines this whole, the power of limits is basically the containment that allows for creation to occur. It's two oppositional forces, and here he describes them as two radii coming together to create the pattern of sunflower seeds or daisy hearts, how those things materialize in a very specific pattern. Well, it's two dinergic forces. He coins the term dinergy, dynamic synergy, oppositional forces, complementary antagonisms. Anyone who's in a long-term relationship knows about that. Where else might we find this? Well, DNA, the double helix of the DNA. And this I actually have been telling people was a sea anemone, a sea creature, a little diatom. It's not. It's actually part of muscle tissue or blood tissue or cell tissue multiplied, amplified 10,000 times from this book. A lot of these illustrations are from this book. So here it shows up in our bodies in various scales. It shows up in weather patterns. It shows up. This is the graphics again from the Power of Limits, showing the different arc angles that get manifest when you observe a floret in the middle of a daisy or a sunflower. Very specific. The golden mean ratios play right out. The angles actually expand in a golden mean ratio, growing in length, perfect harmonic proportion. So, what I'm getting at here, what am I getting at here? What I'm getting at is there may just be, as David Bohm said, some sort of intricate order amidst all this stuff. Now, we've looked at it from the structural aspect. I want to take a quick second before we go too much further and bring in the dynamic aspect of it. And like this, I'll show lights again.
What we see here is the effect of vibration on a specific substance, lycopodium powder, or spores of the club moss. We have strewn it uniformly on a diaphragm of stretched paper with a diameter of about 30 centimeters, which we now excite by vibration. This causes the powder to clump. We can see many small clumps, many small globular piles, and the more intense the vibration, the more piles there are. If the note is louder, that is to say, if the amplitude is increased, these masses of powder move to the center and make a kind of dust cloud there. An ever wider area of powder is affected, and more of these globules are formed. They are not at rest, but in a state of continuous motion.
Okay, just to save time, I'm going to zip this ahead a little bit. What you're seeing here are audible pulsations. So the amplitude diminishes, it condenses, it increases. Come on.
Now we shall take a closer look at these movements. Here is one of these forms. We can see how the material rises up in the middle and is transported to the periphery.
Okay, I'm going to zip through this again in the interest of time. But what I want to show you is this.
The change is there is still a whole system of radial circulation. At certain frequencies, or with certain tones, an extraordinarily interesting phenomenon is seen. Watch.
Watch.
We see two regularly and continuously rotating areas at either end of a diameter, going round and round like weathercocks. This is the expression of a rotating wave motion. We can see they are rotating in an anti-clockwise direction.
And that's the sound that we hear, that buzz, that hum. Is what's
We
going
now
on.
switch to a different frequency and produce the same phenomenon, but this time in a clockwise direction, because the frequency is different. If we go back to the previous frequency, we have the same phenomenon again in an anti-clockwise direction. Notice that this rotary movement does not affect the circulation or convection in the least.
Okay, so you can really see the dynamic aspect there, and how just by changing the frequency, it's the same substance on the same membrane, which is a latex membrane in this case, that the frequency determines the directionality of this thing. It's the exact same pattern. It's amazing to me. And here you see pulsation. This is like the dissolution of the great Proleas, wiping out the entire universe. Pulse, an amplitude pulse, blanks the whole screen. Okay, this is what I want to show you.
You must realize that the same diaphragm and the same powder are used, but that the tones are different. Here we have a flow pattern. This means that where we had a structural pattern before, we now have a violent dynamic one. A current is formed and the powder rushes along in the flow path, leaving the black patches of the diaphragm completely free of powder. Everything is driven into the flow path by the vibration. We add more and more material. But the result is not confusion or chaos. Instead, everything falls into place in the strict flow pattern. A point to notice about all these phenomena is that they can be reproduced at any time, that the factors and conditions of the experiment are known with accuracy. We go on throwing in powder, and every time this attractive and clearly defined flow pattern keeps on emerging from the vibrational field. It is a circulatory system without walls. The walls are, so to speak, the area of vibration. The area of vibration provides the constraint which gives shape to the circulatory flow. Different flow patterns are formed at different frequencies.
Okay, that's really what I wanted to convey there. A bit of the dynamics behind this. And what he just said at the end there was fascinating. This is all written by Yenny and just narrated by a British narrator. You see vibrational force fields, essentially, created audibly. You hear them and you see them. Creating the containment vessel, the power of limits, through which manifestation can actually happen in a visible way. I mean, this is remarkable. It's mind-boggling, actually, to be able to see that, yes?
What frequency would cause it to change?
I wondered that too. And I don't know whether it's an actual harmonic interval that causes it to change, or it's just, I spend a lot of time, as you'll see, when we come back from our break, which I would like to keep as brief as possible, because the longer we take our break, the less I'll be able to do tonight. So that's just a simple equation. I played around with the frequency generators, thinking that we would have harmonic ratios creating disintegration and reintegration patterns. This is something I wanted to actually study, and I'm actually getting research partners to do this. The thing that really attracted me to cymatics after having studied it for a while was the whole process of chaos and reintegration, which I'll get into right after the break. I really want to get into this in a big way. The reason I've structured this way, is I wanted to show you the stills highlighting one pole of what Hans Jenny called the basic triadic phenomenon, elsewise known as the Trinity in all the world's spiritual traditions. One pole is the structure. What's the other pole that we just saw?
Sounds.
The dynamic. Okay? You've got the structural at one end, you've got the dynamic at the other. Thank you. I mean, I'm encouraged this kind of exploration here. Well, what is it that makes the Trinity? You've got effect and effect. Polarity in the pinda. Polar effects in the manifest universe. What's the cause of the structure and the effects that we've been seeing here?
Vibration.
Vibration, sound, frequency, yeah, well, vibration and sound. Yes, those are the pinnacle. That's the apex that manifests through duality as structure and dynamics. Okay? So when we come back, I'm going to get into that a bit more deeply in a sort of diagrammatic layout of that. And we're not going to get into a tenth of what's on this graphic, but I don't have a PowerPoint, so it's going to all come up. And all I'm going to ask you to do is focus on what we're focusing on and trying to ignore as much of the other stuff as possible. And I'll then bring this into how it really applies to us. This is wonderful from a theoretical cognitive standpoint, but the reason I'm here is not to show you physics. And it's not even to show you metaphysics. It's to convey a representation of universal principle and how it plays out mechanically in the world, the manifest world. But what's unique about universal principles?
They're universal.
Who said that? Yes, they're universal. That's what makes them unique. And omnipresent at the same time. So being universal, that means that they operate in our lives in a macro and micro way, and any scale in between. So universal principles are universal. Waveforms, uberales. I mean, they penetrate everything. And the difference in experience can be looked at as a difference in what bandwidth you tune into. Within the body, the different body chakras, within the consciousness, there's a long range of frequencies to tune into. Listen to what anyone says as if it were the last words of a father to his son. Listen with that much compassion, and you'll never feel anger or jealousy again. They say everything that is coming will come. Understand, it is here, right now. Really. Oh, so much to play with, so little time. Actually, I'm going to quote an earlier mentor in my life, of whom some of you are familiar, Alan Hammond, who said, "We have eternity to experience the infinite." I wish I was contemplating that when I was stuck in traffic for a half hour coming down the I-5 to get here. So, we have the polarities, the manifest polarities of structure and dynamics, right? And the causal element of sound or vibration. People see this, the top of it? Okay, so this is my representation, and please understand that none of this work is original to me, and none of these people would be caught dead doing what I'm doing with it. So it's anything that doesn't wash scientifically is my fault, and all the stuff that supports it is really valid. So basically, I'm by nature an editor, and I'm a synthesizer. That's just what I like to do. And so I've taken the beautiful streams that Hans Jenny represents, that Rudolf Steiner, that Goethe, again, the work of Georgi Doxy, many other things. I do trust that I will get to the holosync technology, which is based on Robert Monroe's work with hemispheric synchronization binaural beat frequencies, how this applies psychoacoustically. You know, I'm basically blending a lot of these different elements in. I do just want to touch on the fact that I am producing a long-awaited sequel to this video. Noetic Sciences actually gave me half the award money. Don't laugh. It was actually, well, I got them back. I spent it on a conference. I was originally awarded the money as it was supposed to be completion money, but this video was already done. So basically what I did was I took that money and created the International Sound Colloquium, which I produced for 6 years, bringing leaders in the field of sound and music for healing together. And that was an event that was very successful, and let me know that there was a real desire for this kind of work, a real market for it, and actually enabled and supported me to continue in the depth of work and republish the cymatics book and produce other videos and whatnot. But it never enabled me to finish part 2, which is on psychoacoustics. I am now in the process of completing that, and that little clip with the tonoscope singing into that. By the way, I wanted to tell you that that tonoscope was originally produced by Honer. When I was giving the talk in Seattle last November at the East West, David Hikes, anybody know who David Hikes is, the founder of the Harmonic Choir? Well, he showed up in the audience, and he actually emailed me. Like, we contacted, I found out as I was already flying out there, basically, that he had just done something in Vancouver and could easily be in Seattle. So he brought his Mac with proprietary software and was able to sing into the computer his PowerBook and take existing cymatics images and morph them through the harmonic overtones of his voice. So he demoed this there, which was a real trip. I'm an events producer at heart, so anytime I can incorporate other stuff in a presentation, I love to do it. But what I found out, David told us that Honer had mass-produced these little things as toys, and they were available for a period of time in the early, probably the late 60s, I would imagine, because Jenny died in 72. But they only sold 750,000, so they jumped them. You know, they didn't make their cut point. Now, the Waldorf schools use these as ways of teaching deaf children how to articulate their vowels. If you can't hear your vowels, you're not going to know the difference between an and an oo. But if you can see the pattern that's created when someone else does it, you can reproduce that pattern. So the Waldorf schools still use these if they can get them. And I'm really hoping that they will be redeveloped because they're a tremendous tool. So that is called just an acoustic tonoscope. The other things that we see are electric acoustic tonoscopes. They're electronic frequencies generating the forms and the patterns. Okay, so enough of that for the moment. We will get back to some cool video stuff. But I want to get into really the meat of the tofu of the lecture here. Absolutely correct. Okay, so we have the structure, and please don't get off on the positives, negatives as being goods and bads. I mean, that's irrelevant to this. Think of it in terms of electrical potential. You've got positive and negative. Okay? I'm going to cheat. I'm going to look ahead. Okay, so looking at it through the matrix of the cymatics experiment, we can see that the structural element is determined primarily by the frequency. Now, they're both the frequency and the amplitude. Frequency is the pitch, the sound, the tone. Amplitude is the volume, okay, the loudness. Obviously, amplitude, as we saw in the soundscapes video, has more of an effect than frequency. When you boost the amplitude, boom, you blow that stuff all over creation. And you just wash the whole thing right out. So amplitude is the more dynamic of the two. Frequency is the more structural. You can even see it. The little things that form on the plates are the results of the nodal points, the points of least resistance, within the structure of the plate. and that's where the sand generates. So that is very analogous to the frequency, as we saw in the waveforms that I illustrated earlier. Okay? So we've got the structural element being the frequency, and the dynamic element being the amplitude. Now I'm going to take a bit of a jump here, a bit of a leap of faith, and move it out of the realm of physics, and move it into the realm of consciousness. And this is where I like to play, because it's where we get to create. We get to really create through our consciousness, depending on what frequency band we tune into, and whether we're present with the source, sound, the wave, the pulsation, or consciousness, or whether we're operating off of old structures. And I've called these old structures attitudes. And I define an attitude essentially as a crystallization. Something from previous history, whether this life or any one of the zillions that we've experienced getting to this point in human form, and in evolved enough human form to even be willing to sit through something like this. I mean, we got no first lifers here. Guaranteed. You just would not be interested. You'd be out, guzzling or whatever. So consciousness has evolved to the point where attitudes are beginning to be looked at. So the vast repository of our entire past life experience resides in an aspect of our mind called, in the Eastern traditions, the chitta faculty. And this is just undifferentiated repository of all experience. It's largely inaccessible. It comes up through symbol, through dream, through intense emotional reaction, spontaneously. It's not something that we access through our mental capacity, through normal waking consciousness. It is something that gets accessed through psychoacoustics, when you have the frequencies, the entrainment way, way down in the lowest level of the brain waves. And I won't go into that, but basically, the lower the carrier frequency, I won't even go into that. Basically, the lower the frequency, the more power there is, the more disruption it's going to provide into the nervous system. So it's going to shake things up, and it's going to shake things loose. Okay, that's an entirely different topic that I'd love to get into, but no way we're going to do it in 45 minutes. So we have attitudes. Think of attitudes as lenses through which you view your experience. So we have this life current manifesting in the moment, presenting us with something. And I'm actually going to redefine a word here that we use all the time. And if I get to it, I'm going to redefine a few words for us. Not as if I'm the ultimate authority on this, but I just want to give you a different way, a different attitude about a word we use all the time. It actually structures a lot of our responses to life. The word is circumstance. What do we think of as a circumstance? It can be defined really simply. Isn't a circumstance something that happens to us? Basically, isn't that what we think of as circumstances? Looking at the cymatics, and you haven't seen much of the cymatics, I'd really like to show you some more clips from this video that would show you more about the way the dynamics appears. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it, and that's too bad, but I'll try and describe it a little bit, and we'll show you what we can fit in. So think of circumstance. Circumstance. I almost need to show you something that will show you this dynamically. Okay, we'll do it. How would people feel about running maybe 15 minutes after 9? That's okay? Okay. Hope this is the right one. Okay. This is a segment from A Sound-Minded Body that I think was responsible for me winning the award from the Hartley, from the Isles, from the Hartley Award. This is a segment, and it will go a little bit afield from what we're talking about, but I think you'll see its relevance. You see it? And that's a wah-wah sound of the tape getting ready up to speed.
Hans has shown with his films that particular tones, one tone in particular, when vibrating sound
could be a cueing
has
zone.
been placed on a metal tray,
Okay, that's
can
possible.
change the shape of the sound, take form. So it's louder or harder, another frequency is played, the shape changes. Now, if this happens with
Louder, you say?
Louder.
colors, what's happening to us at the molecular level when a single tone is played at the body? That the drone or the single tone, when directed toward a specific place in the body, can change the structure within the tissue, within the molecules.
What you see with the work of Manzini is you see sound transforming heaps and piles and films of inanimate matter, of materials of various forms and consistencies, just by the introduction of sound, taking on, in a process of gradual differentiation, all the patterns and forms that we see around us in nature, as if it's like a model of the creation through sound. Many traditions have this understanding that the world, as we know it, comes into being and is sustained in its beingness through sound, whether it's the Om in the Hindu tradition, or the word, or the logos in the Western tradition.
There are these expressions. First there was the word, and the word was made into flesh, or hallowed be thy name. Everywhere you find these references, not just in the ancient Vedic traditions, all over, in all the traditions of the world.
You have this idea that the very first anything is a sonorous event which brings about the transformation of spirit into matter.
You think of this huge ocean of silence interacting with itself. When the silence is broken, what else could you get but sound? And that sound then manifests as the whole. So that's the cosmic hum, or the cosmic explosion, or the Big Bang, as you call it. But there's different ways of expressing the same idea. That sound creates form. In India, as you know, there's this whole tradition of mantra healing, for example, of primordial sound. And here there are sounds that are taken that elicit very specific forms. If I make the sound A, after a while it will vibrate every cell in my body. Similarly, the other vowel sounds. Then there are other sounds that will bounce off specific organs more than anything else. For example, the sound it will vibrate more in the ears. The sound ka, ga, bha will vibrate here more than anything anywhere else. The sound ha will vibrate more in the stomach. The sound ma will vibrate more in the sinus cavities. It's the simple, well-known primordial sound known as Om. Anytime you make that sound in front of a drop of oil, for example, or a drop of water, it will manifest into a distinct form known as the Sri Yantra.
The human voice can also remain visible with simple vibrators. Various vowels show typical characteristics depending on the nature of their sound. We can see the spectrum, as it were, of the sounds.
If you impose vibrations on plates of sand and so on, you get patterns of form appearing.
Notice his left hand is touching the bottom of the plate at harmonic ratios to create the different patterns. It's the same bow, the same plate, so he is creating the intervals and change the patterns.
The forms in nature are not due to vibrations being imposed from outside on passive particles. They're owing to the whole vibratory structure of activity which makes up the particle itself. Atoms are vibratory structures of activity. Molecules are vibratory structures of activity. Crystals are. Now, in the case of a living organism, the whole thing is a complex rhythmic structural pattern of activity. In our own case, we know, for example, we have daily cycles of activity, slow rhythms. Women have monthly cycles. We have the breathing cycles, the heartbeat cycles, shorter cycles. We have then more rapid cycles of activity in the brain revealed by electroencephalographs and so on. And then within ourselves we have biochemical cycles, many of them per second. And then within those biochemical cycles, vibratory patterns in the proteins, very fast vibrations there, and then the vibrations within the atoms inside those. So there's a nested hierarchy of vibrations within vibrations. At every level, there's a structured activity which is vibratory or rhythmic.
Okay. So, I will definitely forget this, but it just occurred to me, given the fact that there aren't any of these here, if people do want to buy them, I've got other presentations that I'll be taking those with me when I get them from Jordan. So there's two ways you can do it. One is to do the prepaid order form, and I'll give, Jordan will hold on to those for you because you paid for them. The other way, I realize that Sound Piece actually can order them for you. So that takes that whole problem out. Now, get back to the lecture. There was a lot in that little segment that we could take off on. And just a little bit that Sheldrake was talking about, the difference between the cymatics experiments and living tissue. The cymatics experiments were all external phenomena impacting inert substance. Now, what's this thing about circumstance? I mean, I never realized it that way, but that's the difference between a living, breathing, conscious form. And John Beaulieu gets into this in a big way in this video as well. Brilliant statements from this man about how we are the resonating source of our experience through the way that we perceive, through the lens of attitude and attention. Okay? So where you focus your attention through the matrix of attitude determines your experience. So there you have another triangle. This is not just a triangle. I would actually envision it more as a star tetrahedron, three-dimensionally. And each point has its own series of triangles that branch off from that. It's an incredibly complex structure when you really just open up to it. And I'm not trying to make complex structures. I mean, it's a very simple structure. The basic triadic phenomena. So simplicity and complexity, there's beauty in the forms. It's just, it's quite amazing. So to get back to this idea of circumstance, another way of looking at circumstance, as you've seen now, you've seen the dynamic element forming around the frequency. Well, how about your experience that is circum, the stance that you maintain? Okay? So you maintain a certain stance, and you're putting out certain waveforms because of your attunement to consciousness at the apex. You're going to experience the dynamic of this attunement, and you'll see structures appearing as a result of it. So in that case, the flow goes this way. And one comes down and across. Now, the same flow comes through the structures of your attitudes and goes into the dynamics of your experience. So it's the same process. It can go either way. So you can have circumstances which come in and accost you, or you can source your experience. Now, just because you're sourcing your experience doesn't mean you're not going to get stuck in traffic, doesn't mean you're not going to get hurt, doesn't mean you're not going to whatever. I mean, pain happens. That's part of life. And discomfort is the major motivator of life. So the big question is, how does one perceive this? Where is the matrix of attention when the stuff comes back? And I'm going to quote a contemporary spiritual master, Gary Wilson, who says, the world in which you live has not been projected onto you, but by you. Can't you see that in the cymatic stuff? Don't you see that your experience is as much a result of the way that attention works through attitudes as it is any objective reality of what's happening? So these are profound implications that have never been articulated by the science end of things, but they are certainly inherent in this structural dynamic way of expressing universal principle through physics in this particular case. Okay. I have an entire series of dynamic and structural polarities, these dichotomies. And I just don't know that it's worth doing more than just whizzing right through them. I now know that it's not worth doing more than whizzing right through them. But I will do that really quickly. And just want to mention a couple of things about attitude. The memory is the capacity, through the imagination, to imprint directly into the subconscious. So one needs to actually turn that around. And this is something that you just can't do through force of will. So that has been my experience, and that has been the experience of every human being that's ever walked the planet. And that's a really arrogant-sounding statement, but I'll just leave that to you to do on your own. And that is where a force larger than the ego mind, self-will, comes in. And that can either come through subjugation to the will of a stronger entity, be that a teacher, be that a religion, be that a belief system, be that some sort of external structure, or it can come through one's own life experience, usually in the form of pain or chaos. I'll get into that in a little while. The other element is attention. Okay, that was the attitude wrap. This is the attention wrap. And please forgive me, this is really fast, and I can't really elaborate this. I mean, we're about 20 minutes to 9 at this point, and it would really take a lot to elaborate. Again, my purpose in doing this is to just plant some seeds for future contemplation. You know, you've heard this stuff now. It's in that database. It's in that beautiful chitta faculty. It's there. It can be accessed through purposeful placement of attention. It's now conscious. It's there. Attention must develop the ability to discriminate. Where do you focus your attention? Well, is it on circumstances in your life? Or is it on the source, the sound, the pulsation, which animates these experiences into being in your life? It's where you direct your attention. In one sense, you can actually view yourself as nothing more than your attention. I mean, what are we other than our attention? We're physical manifestations that have come about through the placement of our attention in what we eat, how we breathe, how we stress ourselves in our lives, how we take care of ourselves, how we unfold in consciousness. This all reflects in our physiology moment to moment and creates the composite of who we think we are. Okay, so I just don't think I'm going to show too much more from this one. I think I've gotten the basics of what we need out of that. And in the interest of keeping things moving, I want to just go through this very briefly. I mentioned chaos. Basically, the laws of physics are very operative in human consciousness. Nothing's going to happen unless something affects it. Basically, inertia rules consciousness. And there are some very important spiritual principles that can be articulated in that regard. But let's just take that as a working supposition, okay? Nothing happens unless something happens. We don't self-generate too much. I mean, we need pain or the desire mechanism to motivate us one way or another. Okay. So, usually, in my experience, I'm not so hip as to anticipate what's coming around the corner. And when it comes around the corner, my first reaction is it shouldn't be happening. Even if it's something pleasant. Well, if it's something pleasant, I usually don't judge it that quickly. It's usually once I get bored with it that I judge it. So, this is an aspect of our experience, or my experience anyway, that is always there. I mean, anytime I focus my attention there, I realize, you're tense right now, you're resisting something. What is not perfect right now? Okay? So what I'm trying to get at here is going to take another little leap because I don't have time to work out all the steps from here to there. But what I want to do is I want to get into this aspect of chaos and show that not only is pain purposeful, but chaos is extremely purposeful. And in order to do this, I started contemplating two words that we use interchangeably. And I looked them up in the American Collegiate Dictionary, and I don't think they've changed since I was in college. But they sure are different words, even though they're used interchangeably. I looked at the difference between randomness and chaos. And we use them pretty interchangeably. I mean, we think of randomness pretty much the way it's defined in the dictionary. Haphazardness is something occurring without definite aim, purpose, or reason. Okay? Purposeless is something or other, it's just random occurrence, right? Like circumstance. Whereas chaos suggests utter confusion or disorder, wholly without organization or order. Get the difference? Oh yeah, what is it? I didn't get any difference.
You mentioned order.
Well, listen again. haphazardness as something occurring without definite aim, purpose, or reason, versus utter confusion or disorder, wholly without organization or order. To me, that's pretty much the same thing. But dictionaries have number twos. Number two was the infinity of space or formless matter. Now, this is going back to the Greek, chaos and cosmos. Cosmos, the manifested universe. Chaos is the womb from which the cosmos emerged. The infinity of space or formless matter supposed to have preceded the existence of the ordered universe. Now, does that sound random? Sounds a little like David Bowen's implicate order, that there is something yearning to come forth in every aspect of what we perceive as randomness. So is randomness just an artifact of the mind, of our judgments, of our attitudes? You know, what makes something without definite aim, purpose, or reason? Whose reason? Whose aim? Whose purpose? Past experience, through our attitudes, and where we place our attention, what we tell ourselves about the story. Yeah. So, there's a difference between chaos and randomness. And the difference is one is purposeful, and the other is not seen as purposeful. John Beaulieu, I hope to be able to show you the segment, and again, it just depends on how long we go. Beautiful, beautiful segment where he talks about there's no noise in nature. Noise does not exist in nature. And I would say randomness does not exist in nature. It's an artifact of perception, or lack thereof. Yeni saw cymatics everywhere. He saw universal principles in everything. Where's the randomness in universal harmonic order? Well, there are phases. There are phases of chaos in between reintegration. And there's another video clip that I show this in the water stuff, similar to those dynamic structures that you see. God, I'd really like to show that. I will show it. And we're just going to be quick. We're just going to condense time and space here. Okay, this is another clip out of the video that I shot, the footage that I shot in Switzerland of Yeni's original equipment. This is the equipment that created those patterns, which look like such beautiful harmonic static patterns. And this will enable us to see how they were created and some of the relevance to tonight's topic. This will probably be loud. Yeah, we're good.
What we're seeing here is a small sample of water being vibrated by sound. The first view is the container, or ring, holding the water and spilling off of the face of the lens. Light shines up from the bottom, through the lens, and passes through the vibrating water. Here we have a side view. The light travels up through another set of lenses and is reflected off of a mirror onto a flat surface where we can view the magnified image of the standing waves, which are created within the water sample by the sound that we hear in the background. This beautiful harmonic pattern portrays a radially symmetrical form frequently seen in nature, as in flowers and small sea creatures. As we change the frequency, the pattern immediately changes in response to the animating tone.
Can you hear that low frequency? Can you hear that?
If we view this phenomenon in slow motion from above, we can see a much clearer view of the
you can hear the higher
inner water
frequencies. For some reason,
sample
the low
itself.
frequencies aren't coming through.
You can see it moving within itself, undulating, almost like the motion of a jellyfish, moving into the center and back out again, all the while maintaining a very regular and coherent pentagonal shape. This same phenomenon, when viewed as before, reveals this 10-faceted jewel, an almost perfect crystalline structure. Yet this is a dynamic structure, portraying the standing waves created by the two phases of the pentagonal shape we saw undulating so clearly from above. If we slow down this phenomenon even further, viewing it at 1 frame per second, while focusing the camera lens on a focal plane within the water sample, we can observe this remarkable sequence of harmonic patterns as a series of static, crystal-like lattices. The similarity of these forms to ice crystals is undeniable. While this unique perspective accentuates the structural elements, there is another process at play here, which is equally astounding. As mentioned earlier, the liquid moves through regular phases undulating through itself in response to the frequency of the vibration. As long as the frequency and the amplitude remain the same, the resulting pattern will be maintained, in this case, as a six-sided hexagonal figure. Here again we see a rhythmic succession of phases, pulsating in total adherence to the animating tone. But if we change this tone, another phenomenon becomes immediately apparent. We start without any vibration, and slowly increase the amplitude. Concentric waves appear, much like you'd see if you dropped a pebble in water. As we increase the amplitude ever so slightly, a dramatic effect ensues. Here, viewed in slow motion, we can begin to see this stable structure dissolving into chaos. The patterns created in these experiments are determined by the quality of the substance. In this case, the very structure of the water itself determines the way it will respond when subjected to vibration. Different substances respond differently, depending on their viscosity or how fluid they are. In this instance, a four-figured quadrate pattern is formed in response to the tone that we hear in the background. If we vary the frequency of the tone, changing the pitch in other words, the pattern will change in accordance with the new pitch or frequency. If we vary the amplitude or the loudness, an entirely different series of patterns will emerge. In this case, the patterns repeat a hexagonal motif. If we look carefully, we can see that these hexagonal figures are actually the result of a trigonal or three-sided pattern, moving in and out through itself in two phases, as we saw with the five-sided figure. As fascinating as these patterns may be, what is most interesting is watching their dynamics, the way they emerge from a state of turbulence. In fact, if you watch closely, you may observe that between every new form, there is a period of disintegration or chaos.
That speaker was not behaving properly there.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, it came a little bit of chaos. Okay.
Is that a clip from the same guy?
No, this is something new that I'm working on. This will be in the psychoacoustic video. Because there's tremendous relevance to binary beats and the way this works with programs. Yes?
Looking at these patterns, which are the sound create these, but what creates the snowflake pattern, which is so similar to
Right. Okay. The question was what creates these snowflake patterns? Do you mean in snow?
Yeah, because, I mean, they fall silent.
Right. Well, do they fall silent?
Well, probably not.
Yeah.
I just want to-
Okay. Well, basically the question is, these patterns that look like snowflakes were generated by vibration in water, liquid. There's some wonderful books. Are people familiar with Messages from Water?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I would have them here. But, oh, great. Thank you. Great. You want to take them? I think take them on the road a bit. These are in the FedEx boxes. And I actually do sell these off the website. So these books actually are quite remarkable in that they show the effect in crystallization of water samples of vibratory phenomena such as music. Now that's readily relatable to cymatics. Thought, emotion, words written in different languages, taped onto vials of water. Then he takes a little droppler, drops it on a frozen pipette, a petri dish, takes a pipette, puts it in a petri dish, and gets the crystallization patterns. And they become harmonic patterns when they're subjected to harmonious states of emotion or thought or feeling. So, again, another thing in this, these books are well worth looking at. They're really cool. And again, I do carry them on the website, cymaticsource.com, if you're interested in them. Another dynamic that you can get from this is the whole thought-feeling thing. I mean, thoughts could be seen as structures, could be seen as attitudes, right? And feelings, or emotions, if you want to get a little bit more particular about feelings, could be seen as the emotion, the dynamic element, right? So the old metaphysical principle is manifestation is the uniting of thought and feeling, thought and emotion. So if you really want to do something, you're never going to get anywhere if you're just going through the rope of the thought, visualization, all that stuff. You've got to put your astral body into it. You've got to go whole hog. If you don't put that energy in there, nothing's going to happen. It's infertile. Those two dynamics need to be there. So again, you're taking this basic triadic phenomenon and doing it downward. You're doing the creative aspect of it from the two polarities, or outward, or inward. However you want to look at it, it's multidimensional. Yes?
Have you ever seen Patricia's son?
I've seen video of her. I've never seen her live.
Have you seen her do the sounds?
You know, I've never seen that. No, I've just seen.
I've seen her transform from a male to a female while she did the sounds. Actually, it's not Christ. And it wasn't just me, other people saw it in the audience. We weren't expecting that. You're up here whispering afterwards. Did you see what I saw?
It's amazing stuff. I mean, sound is generative. Yeah, yeah.
She disappeared.
Yeah, well, actually, I forgot I had these. FedEx didn't lose these because I carry them with me. Man, I'm not going to get into chaos if I do this. Okay. I'm in chaos anyway. Okay, really quickly, I'm just going to illustrate a couple of things that Emoto showed in his work. And this is going to be so fast. But these kind of things are conveyable very quickly. So I'm just going to show you, book 1, volume 1 talks a lot about pure and polluted water sources. This happens to be a water source just before an earthquake. And this was immediately after the earthquake. And then shortly thereafter, how much more it formed. So you can see the crystallization becoming more complete as a result of vibration frequency. Well, here are polluted water sources, of which there are plenty. And here are what they look like after they've been prayed over. So what he did again was take the water samples, put them in a vial, pray over them, and then drop them from a pipette into a frozen petri dish in a cold chamber. And instead of getting patterns like that, you got patterns like that. So this, it's very controversial stuff because obviously it's not very physical, even though it is, physically demonstrated. But one person, I had a great question, and I wasn't thinking when I answered it, or didn't answer it. He said, but has anyone ever done a double-blind study on this? Now, what are double-blind studies designed for?
To repeat.
But what are they supposed to blind you from?
Any effect on
which is faith.
Which is exactly what his experiments are about. Right. Is the effect of the projection of consciousness, intent, or presupposition into inert substance. So I just thought that was the funniest question in the world. It wasn't until I came home and was going to bed that night and I was thinking about that. Oh my God, did I miss a great one there? I mean, it was the ultimate, refutation of that. Okay, let's get the house lights again. So, oh boy. Okay, 9 o'clock. I'm going to do this really fast, but it's worth doing. So, I'd love to show more graphics. Some of this stuff is illustrated really nicely in Bill Harris's book. He takes Ilya Prigoghine's work on chaos theory and brings it into the aspects of brain technology. Now, I got to tell you, this is a shameless marketing book for his audio entrainment program. No question about it. I mean, that's why he put it out. That's the purpose of it. But I use images from it when I do a longer presentation here because it really illustrates the way we deal with chaos and too much input into our system. He's using too much input electronically to shake up the nervous system. Life uses too much input all the time. Okay? It's very purposeful. Okay, so I want to approach this in our waning moments together from two perspectives from particle physics. We have obviously we have the wave perspective, which would be which? Dynamic or structural? As opposed to the particle perspective. Okay, the wave is the dynamic, and actually it could be seen as the source. You've got the particle as the structure, okay? So let's look at wave versus particle perspective as it abides in our consciousness, okay? It's a phenomenon. Universal principles are universal. They show up everywhere. Both of the following, both wave and particle perspectives, comprise a unique individual awareness or outlook on life. So we have both of these. Nobody is pure one or the other. the proportion or balance of each is different in each of us. So we've got the snowflakes matrix, the same pattern, but no two alike. So the proportion of wave and particle consciousness in each of us, not only is it changed to our inherent makeup, but it changes daily, moment to moment, depending on what we're encountering, whether we're at the effect of our circumstances or sourcing our circumstances. The wave perspective could be seen as the enlightened or mystical view of life. Unity underlies all of manifest creation. Okay, from the wave perspective, you have certain attitudes, let's call them. One of them being unity underlies all of manifest creation. So this is an awareness that one operates through when they're in the wave phenomenon, wave perspective. Universal principles are inherent in all aspects of mind experience. Even right now, in the midst of pain, universal principles are inherent in all aspects of mind experience. Harmony, beauty, and grace are the operative principles. So here's an awareness and understanding that one gets. Harmony, beauty, and grace. They are universal. They're ready to be resonated with. Anytime we tune into that frequency band, that exists. Harmony exists. Grace and beauty exists. It is the state of being that can be tuned into. And that spawns these attitudes of trust, openness, and acceptance, even in the face of chaos, pain, or whatever else. Trust, openness, and acceptance. Can you breathe into that? It's a very different posture, isn't it? Whereas the particle perspective could be viewed as the egoic perspective, the egoic view as opposed to the mystical view, the transpersonal view. The egoic view of life is characterized by contraction or fragmentation of awareness. Right? Egos have to be separated, they're contracted. The universe is perceived as separate from oneself. That is the definition of ego. How can it be any other way? And isolation, fear, and survival are the modus operandi. Okay? Now, I'm not making ego wrong here, because without survival, where would consciousness be? Lower vertebrates and the higher vertebrates, as the brain continues to develop, the neocortex, it's just the entire history of evolution growing out. Well, the ego is doing the same thing. It's undifferentiated. If I had more time, I'd go into the Platonic Solids and show how each of these Platonic Solids represents one of the elements, one of the 5 elements that are incorporated into consciousness. The 5 elements represent mineral, water, earth, water, air, fire, and ether. I think I've got this right. Air. They're antithetical to each other, so you can stretch it. But only the human being has the ether element, which is awareness of oneself being aware. So self-awareness is the ether element. It's the highest element. It's the point at which the ego can begin to observe itself. And that takes place through the placement of attention, through these attitudes of openness. If you're being defensive, there's no way the ego is going to be observing itself. Everyone else is going to tell you what you're doing, but you don't see it. So, the particle perspective, the egoic view of life, contraction, fragmentation of awareness, the universe perceived as separate from oneself, and then therefore one is separate from everything. Separation is the modus operandi there, leading to the 3 little misses. Misperception, misconception, and misappropriation of energy. So again, this is how we create our lives, through the matrix of the particle perspective, through the ego. We're constantly giving out energy to sustain our illusions of separateness, to keep the ego alive as a separate entity. The ego is creating itself. It's so amazing. The ego creates itself through this illusion of separateness, and then it structures an entire universe to create the illusion of continuity through instant moments of time, to create its own existence, to sustain its own existence. It's just like the 3 chakras in the body. You have the Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the creator and the reproductive, the sustainer and the digestive, the destroyer in the heart. It's creating this whole pattern. The ego is just constantly sustaining itself through illusion and Maya, with the purpose of just surviving. And this is consuming all our life energy, all our conscious energy, keeping it locked in the lower chakras of the body, not allowing the attention to rise up to the third eye and begin to perceive things from above the body consciousness. And moving through that into the realm of wave phenomena, where you actually begin to experience life from the unheard sound current that's animating through the Godhead, the unahad shab, unstruck sound, that actually descends and strikes the third eye and bifurcates into what's called in the Eastern mystical traditions, the light and the sound. Light being knowledge, wisdom, understanding, one aspect of this basic triadic phenomena, again, leading to structures and attitudes and separation and particles. And the other is the sound, which leads to waves. Now this is all in the manifest realm of duality, beneath the levels of the highest mind. Everything is dual at that point, polarized. Everything exists in polar opposites. And you don't have to go too far to figure that out. Where you do have to go far is being able to rise your energy up and to bring it up to the point of unification. And that is where a teacher is absolutely crucial. And I'm certainly not setting myself up as a teacher of that. But the technology does exist and always has existed ever since we devolved from the Godhead an infinite amount of time ago. It's like the salmon swimming back up to where it spawned. It's programmed in us. And it's actually programmed in a very specific way that is scientifically observable. And the reason I am so fascinated by cymatics and all this other stuff is because it actually represents the inherent process of reunification with our godliness through the elevation of consciousness. And there is a science that exists that shows you how to do this. I can tell you about it, but I can't show you how to do it. But the science does exist. And it actually now exists in America for the first time ever in pure form. And they're called the light and sound teachings. These are the same teachings that Pythagoras articulated, that Rumi and Hafiz and Kabir and all the great Eastern mystics that were carried through the Sufi lineages until the Adi Granth was written. And it was no longer passed through a living master. It was codified into a book. And the actual transmission of the sound current was lost in the Sufi lineage. So it became essentially a great repository of dead knowledge, just like all other religions. Wonderful for creating great intricate structures and keeping the mind really well entertained, keeping the ego firmly in charge. Okay?
Is Sanskrit an exception to that?
It is no exception. It is an example of a living interference pattern manifestation. Sanskrit letters. Oh, I have a Sanskrit t-shirt. Too bad it's hanging on your clothesline. Are the actual, and so are Hebrew, the original Hebrew script, and some of the ancient Chinese, very close to the actual vibrational interference patterns of the tones that created those letters, or that the letters represent. So if you were in a smoke-filled chamber, in a turbulent chamber, and you articulated that sound loudly enough, the smoke would actually form. And Stan Tenen, I believe, did these things with candles, you projecting sound into candles and getting form. It's a video that I carry. It's not on my website. Yeah, the Meru Foundation carries them as well. You can get them on Meru.com. Okay, so I got a little off track. Yeah, a lot of the ancient, but especially Sanskrit, that is one of the most pure. I just want to bring this to your attention for anyone who might be moved to explore this further. And again, proselytizing is ridiculous. Everyone's resonating exactly where they need to be. That's the beauty of this entire system. Whatever you desire, the world in which you live has not been projected onto you, but by you. What does that mean? It means you get what you want. What you most want is what we're creating constantly for ourselves. So there is no way that someone can convince you to do something you don't want to do. So why bother? Well, we sure sell a whole lot of shit that way, don't we? By manipulating the chitta faculties and the desires, thinking that we're actually going to get something from all that stuff. And we do. I sell books, and I think they really do help people to see things differently and to shake up some old concepts. We will not get into chaos, and it just won't happen. We probably will since we step out the door. And don't laugh. Be serious. This has been some very major stuff that's come through here. When I did the talk last week at the Awakening Museum, which is a beautiful space in downtown Santa Fe, we went home that night, and going up the stairs, a glass bottle got knocked down all the stairs and shattered all over everything. About 1:45 in the morning, when we finally got to our friend's house. Well, it was late by the time we cleaned it up. But the interesting thing was, when I got back to the Awakening Museum the next day to pack up all the books and stuff, there had been a brawl in their parking lot. 2 windows had been broken. There were bullet casings in the parking lot.
Are you listening, Jordan?
So, yeah, make sure you lock your door. When you put a cause out, there's going to be something that comes back. And it's not always what you expect. It's not like good vibes go out, good vibes come back. Good vibes go out with an incredible amount of intensity, and all sorts of stuff comes back. And that's where attitude and attention become primary, because you then going to want to judge what comes back from the matrix of your previous experience. So that's where it's really crucial to stay open, to stay receptive to your experience, and to recognize that everything is perfect, that universal order prevails, that harmony and grace and beauty are the operative principles through which your life is animated, through which your perspective can be maintained, and therefore you source that experience in your life as you're sweeping up the broken glass. And not getting it in your fingers because you keep that in consciousness. So I just want to mention that the light and sound teachings in the United States, the purest light and sound teachings, the least diluted, are called, have been organized into a teaching called the Master Path. And this book, From Light to Sound, The Spiritual Progression, A Journey of Soul's Unfoldment, is sort of the public teachings for that. It's a very beautiful introduction to the teachings of light and sound. And basically he goes through comparing world religions and show where, like Buddhism, will take you to cosmic consciousness, which is the very highest part of the mental domain. But it's still below the domain of duality. So Buddhism requires a tremendous amount of discipline and personal will to try and transcend the desire body, which is the astral body, which actually is above the mental body. You don't enter the astral body until you get through the third eye. So it's basically flawed. It's tremendous discipline. It is a wonderful path for those who resonate there. But if you're ready to move beyond that, to actually enter into the astral kingdom, where you begin to access the source of power in your life, well, you need something that goes further. You need something that's sourced from a higher level. So I'm not going to say much more than that. I will say that if you're interested, www.masterpath.org. Take a look, you'll get it from the source. The teacher's name is Sri Gary Olson. He's the man who said that statement about, I was born in Fargo, North Dakota, what do you expect? But his purpose in incarnating is to bring the light and sound teachings to an American audience, which is very active, very different from the meditative mind of the East, where the light and sound is also existent in several different trains that have been going on forever. I mean, the Radhaswami, the Ruhani, several different satsangs in the Punjab also have the light and sound teaching. That's all I'm going to say about that. Yes?
Before we go, could we all do a line together so we can resonate a nice sound?
Yeah, we could do that. Is there another question in the back?
I don't know if this has been
Can we just hold this for a second longer, please?
I don't know if this has been published anywhere, but you mentioned sound and intention and shape.
Yes.
When I did some dolphin research years ago, and one of the things they discovered was that dolphins sense the emotional package around the body as shape. And what they do is they burst sonar at different frequencies to smooth that out so they can communicate.
At our sound colloquium,
responds to that.
yes, at our sound colloquium, we had people from the Florida Bodywork Institute. I can't remember their name this instant, but they do craniosacral stuff. It's a guy's name. Upledger, thank you. The Upledger Institute, where they actually work with dolphins, pulsing while they're doing craniosacral work in the water. Yes, very much so. Okay, I get a sense that we could go in a million different directions. I would just like to, we had a suggestion here to do an Om. I would actually suggest something else. Om actually brings you to the top of the mental body. If we want to do a tone together, let's do something that's going to take us up to the third eye.
There you go.
Okay? A little experiential. So I'm going to need to be potted down a little bit. Thank you for suggesting that. Okay, before we do this, because I have a feeling we will then mostly be leaving, I just want to thank you all for taking this ride with me. It's been an incredible journey for me to be able to present this material to some people who have been my spiritual mentors in this room right now. So, and in a sense, you've all been my spiritual mentors to some degree or another. So I just want to honor that and acknowledge that in each of you. The beautiful point of origination in each of us, the fractal that unfolds from the oneness and myriad reflections on some being. And that's the matrix that I would like to set for our little toning exercise here. This is an opportunity to ride the sound current back to its source. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to chant an ancient, I guess it's a Sanskrit word for God. It's simply hue. It's a very beautiful word. It's used by the Ekankar people in their attempts to get out of the body. And what we do not want to do is get out of our body. We actually, the 6 upper craniums, the 6 body chakras take you up to just below the third eye. There are 6 more between the third eye and the crown chakra, which exists within the cranium. All of those, all 12 chakras exist within the body. It is purposeless to project oneself out into the astral realms because all you're going to do is pick up hitchhikers. And these hitchhikers are largely more powerful and more astute, well, not astute, but more able to manipulate energy because they aren't stuck in the physical body. So that's a good way to get yourself sidetracked. So when we do this, focus the energy on the third eye. Bring it up to that level, or if you're more evolved, bring it down to that level. But focus the energy on the third eye with the attitude of maintaining your composure and your autonomy, but not as an ego, as a waveform. Okay? So we're going to do this little chant of hue, and then, I'll be here for a while. I'd be happy to field any questions that I'm able to field. But, really, there aren't any questions. There's just more mind stuff. So let's just have this experience, and, to some extent, just hold it. And be prepared for what comes next. Okay? Just, watch where you put your feet, drive carefully on your way home, and be also aware that any compulsions that you have might want to rear their ugly head. If you have a propensity for some type of going on a bender, it may come back at you tonight or over the next couple of days. Because the stuff we're dealing with is very powerful here. I don't mean to do a bait and switch here, but we really have done some really strong articulation. Let's put it this way. In this group, we've articulated some really strong universal principles. And what I'd like to see is that it's able to be maintained and be purposeful for you all. So, let's do a hue. We can drop the house lights on that. And thank you all very much for coming. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
RVML Resource Center is a volunteer-operated federal 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organization. RVML is dedicated to providing easy access to a comprehensive collection of information on a variety of metaphysical, spiritual, and personal development subjects. RVML accepts and appreciates all donations. Material and monetary contributions are fully tax-deductible. This recording is not copyrighted and permission is granted to broadcast, exhibit, or duplicate all or part of this program for non-commercial educational purposes. This live presentation was organized and presented by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. For more information, please visit rvml.org.